Hello everyone, Professor Barth here, going audio only today. If you follow my channel, you know that I'm a passionate defender of freedom of speech. I've made a number of videos on it. And so I have to tell you this news today from the Department of Homeland Security. The creation of a Disinformation Governance Board. This is extremely alarming and quite stunning. Now, in truth, we shouldn't be too surprised here. I mean, the left has made no secret of their growing hostility to free speech. Now, it doesn't cover everyone on the left, but in general, on the left right now, free speech is, well, let's just say it's not a fashionable idea. So now we have this Disinformation Governance Board. Here we are. And it's headed by a woman named Nina Jankowicz. Nina Jankowicz will head the board. She served as a disinformation fellow at the Wilson Center. More on that in a moment. She is a hyper-partisan, an activist. In 2020, she suggested that the Hunter Biden laptop story was Russian disinformation. She's insisted that anyone who's raised questions about possible fraud in the 2020 election, that such persons should be censored online. On her own Twitter account, she admitted as late as last November that she's provoked arguments with people in public who refuse to wear masks. So, she's totally, over the top on that issue. And then just a couple days ago on NPR, she said, quote, "I shudder to think about free speech absolutists taking over more platforms and what that would look like for marginalized communities." So, that's who's in charge of this Disinformation Governance Board. And only coincidentally, of course, it follows just 2 days after the acquisition of Twitter by Elon Musk. The same Elon Musk who said free speech is essential for civilization in the 21st century. He's absolutely right about that. He is absolutely right about that. Thank God Elon Musk is in charge of Twitter now. What a victory for the American people. But, so the government's got to move in now. The government's got to move in, and they've moved in. Now, I noted that she is a fellow at the Wilson Center, studied disinformation at the Wilson Center, which is interesting. If you know something about Woodrow Wilson, Wilson, gave us the Federal Reserve, gave us the federal income tax and direct election of senators, and dragged us into World War I, among other things. Wilson, in 1917, just a few weeks after the U.S. joined World War I, established via executive order the Committee on Public Information. The Committee on Public Information. That sounds a lot like this newly created Disinformation Governance Board. That's Wilson. Nina Jankowicz was a fellow at the Wilson Center. So what was this Committee on Public Information? Well, it was a propaganda outlet. In fact, it was the first propaganda office ever created within the U.S. government. It was designed to first mobilize public opinion, but also to crack down on domestic dissent. They didn't have the word disinformation that I'm aware of back then, but if they did, that's what they would have called it, disinformation. It was also known as the Creel Committee because it was headed by a man named George Creel. The Creel Committee, or Committee on Public Information, produced posters, films, speeches, all propagating the official view of the government through a very particular lens with all the biases and exaggerations. Now, all sides of World War I were doing this. The Germans were issuing propaganda too, but the U.S. had its propaganda issued by Creel and the Committee on Public Information. But Creel did not stop there. He censored. Creel had the post office, for example, censor what he called dangerous viewpoints and publications in the mail. Now, who decided what was, quote, dangerous? Well, George Creel did. Creel's committee, which had a number of, a couple dozen at least, divisions and all over the country, investigated journalists who published stories that the administration found inappropriately negative. Wilson didn't stop there. In 1918, following year, Congress, at Wilson's urging, passed the Sedition Act. The Sedition Act made it illegal to use, quote, disloyal, profane, scurrilous, or abusive language, end quote, about the U.S. government. Illegal to use disloyal or abusive language about the U.S. government or about its military operations. And if you were convicted under the Sedition Act, sentences range from 5 to 20 years. 5 to 20 years. Now, there's no Sedition Act at this moment in time. But isn't that interesting that it was the year after Committee on Public Information? Didn't take long to, first you have the propaganda and you hire a bunch of propaganda artists and then you censor. So that's what you start doing. You try to ban certain viewpoints, but then you discover pretty quickly you've got to put a little more teeth behind it. And so you just make it outright illegal. Now, we're not there. We may not get there. Pray God we don't. Okay? But it's important to know that happened. That happened. And, Wilson sicked his Attorney General, A. Mitchell Palmer, on the public, on people who dissented from the administration. Eugene Debs, for example, was arrested under the Sedition Act for denouncing America's participation in World War I. He was sentenced to 10 years. Now, Debs was a socialist. Okay? All right? But you have a right to be a socialist in the United States of America. But that's not why he got arrested. He didn't get arrested for being a socialist. He was arrested because he opposed the war and was public about it. And by the way, Debs was right about that in my view. Some of you may disagree, and that's fine. But Debs was outspoken about this, and for that he received 10 years or was sentenced to 10 years in prison. How did the press respond? The press dutifully fell into line. And in fact, the news media at the time led the charge in promoting the Sedition Act and the Creel Committee, the Committee on Public Information. They were behind all of it. Isn't that funny? Doesn't that sound a lot like today? And the press, you would think, if anybody's going to be for the First Amendment would be the press. But no, that's not what history shows us. You look at history, and actually, the press is very oftentimes the foremost, cheerleaders in a crackdown on civil liberties. Oh, they love it. They love it. In fact, the press and Palmer, loved the Sedition Act so much he desired for it to remain in peacetime. He wanted a peacetime Sedition Act. Well, the U.S. Constitution was outdated anyway. It was over 100 years old, That was the argument at the time by the progressives. The progressives said, oh, this old document. It's over a century old. Well, how could the Constitution possibly be relevant in this new modern year of 1917, 1918? It can't possibly be relevant in our day. You hear the same arguments. History repeats itself, doesn't it? And so, it wasn't until the Republicans got into office in 1920, Warren G. Harding promised a return to normalcy. Coolidge was on his ticket, and Coolidge became president. Did away with a lot of the madness. Actually, Debs was released from prison under Harding. But, looking at that historical example and then looking at today, it's hard not to conclude that there is just something within progressivism that is inherently hostile to free speech. On the whole, I'm not talking about each and every single progressive, but on the whole, progressives will not hesitate to sacrifice civil liberties at the altar of whatever agenda they're trying to get through at the moment, whether that's mobilizing for the war effort, okay, and as we saw under the Wilson administration, or equity, or a pandemic response with universal lockdowns and forced masking and vaccination, forced vaccinations, and all the whole program. And they, when it comes down to it, civil liberties will be sacrificed like that. Okay, they won't hesitate on the whole. And I recognize that there are some progressives who would dissent from that program, and there are. But on the whole, there is within progressivism an authoritarian instinct. There just is an authoritarian instinct. And you look at history, and you look at the present day, and there's just no other way around it. You will support the current thing. In that the truth. Props to Elgato Motto on Substack for that meme there. George Orwell in 1984 described a ministry of truth. In this ministry of truth, decided what was true and what was false. 2 + 2 = 5. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength. Any inconvenient information? Thrown down a memory hole. The Ministry of Truth worked with artists, with the news media, entertainment, educational institutions. Now we have our Disinformation Governance Board, and in truly Orwellian fashion, it's under the authority of the Department of Homeland Security. And there, by the way, that's the Department of Homeland Security's headquarters in Washington, D.C. Quite an imposing building. The Department of Homeland Security. a department that was which was created in 2002, billed as an anti-terrorism department. Right? It was created after September 11th. Now creates a new Disinformation Board to govern your thoughts here within the United States, your speech within the United States. This is, in my view, an Orwellian department. It's an unconstitutional department, and the next truly conservative president should, quite frankly, abolish it. Okay, we had no Department of Homeland Security in World War II. We had no Department of Homeland Security during the Cold War. All of a sudden, after 9/11, we needed a new Department of Homeland Security. President Bush told us we needed a Patriot Act. We needed secret courts and secret warrants and wiretapping and all the rest. Well, for what? Oh, anti-terrorism. Well, what is anti-terrorism? How do you define anti-terrorism? See, that's where it gets slippery. Because that's subjective, isn't it? Because in the name of anti-terrorism, the Department of Homeland Security, together with the NSA, have violated the privacy, unconstitutionally, violated the privacy of U.S. citizens. Okay, not foreign actors, U.S. citizens. Maybe one thing, look, I mean, we have a Department of Defense, and we have our Department of Defense, we have intelligence agencies to deal with bad actors abroad and to collect intelligence for truly national security issues. You do not need a Department of Homeland Security for this. It does not need to exist. And if you look at the targets of the Department of Homeland Security and of the NSA, it's oftentimes the government's political opponents. And now that's what was created after 9/11. And you know what? I remember back in the early 2000s, I'm not going to go on too much about this, but in the early 2000s, I remember when Bush was pushing through Department of Homeland Security, Patriot Act, one after another. Okay, and Republicans were just cheerleading it, and then the Clintonian Democrats and John Kerry and all those guys were all on board too. I remember at that time I was 18 years old, 18 to 20 years old during this sort of span of time. And I remember I remember warning people back then. I was an undergrad in college. I remember talking with conservative Republicans who were all on board with this. I said, you don't know what you're creating. This could be turned on you. I was on the left back then, actually. I was on the left. I couldn't stand Bush. So I was like, oh, I must be left-wing then. And I remember those conversations telling Republicans, it's going to be used against you. And they'd say, oh, shut up. This won't be used against American citizens. Well, here we are. And now it's 2022. And guess what? You've got your Ministry of Truth now in the United States, brought to you by the Department of Homeland Security. What are you going to do about it? Okay? American people better wake up. And again, I said it. Thank God for Elon Musk. That man's got courage, and he's doing important work. And we need to pray for our land, and not allow the authoritarians to run wild. Because I tell you, once the light of freedom is snuffed out in the United States, it ain't coming back. Okay? Not coming back. So be careful with your freedom. All right? Be careful with it. All right. That's all I've got to say. And I'll see you next time. Bye.